Well, Kenya's prosecuting authority has ordered an investigation into the cause of the dam collapse that killed at least 45 people and displaced over 1,000. A dam in Nakuru burst its banks after heavy rains on Wednesday night, but residents suspect a structural default. Search operations are continuing, while some family members have already headed to morgues to identify their relatives. CGTN's Vauldi Carelse has this report from Nakuru County.
Early morning panic in Salai as residents are forced to flee to higher ground. Rumors that a second dam has burst caused anxiety and frantic evacuation. Soldiers try to get people to move more quickly. They can't believe it's happening for the second time in as many days. This time, it's a false alarm. It turns out the government is draining water from another dam.
They've released some water in a controlled way through the outlets. That is one. Then two, they are using 3 pumps to aid in the relieving of that pressure from the amount of discharge in the dam.
Engineers and officials from the Water Ministry are on site monitoring the remaining 2 dams, and the public prosecutor has ordered an investigation into what caused the first dam to collapse. After the initial panic of Friday morning, search operations resume in Salai. Rebecca Kammer and the other displaced families were among those evacuated again. She says they're already traumatized, but she's determined to find her son.
I hope they find my boy. That's what I really hope for.
4-year-old James has been missing since Wednesday night. To confirm he's dead, she has to make the long trip from Salai to Nakuru. Back to the mortuary, where she's already found her mother's body a day after the dam burst. Half of the bodies found in the wreckage of the villagers have yet to be identified. Rebecca Kammer's son is still missing. She says she'll keep coming to the mortuary until he's found. When that will be, she doesn't know. Vauldi Carelse, CGTN, Nakuru, Kenya.
Well, let's go live now to Nakuru, where CGTN's Vauldi Carelse is standing by with the latest on the story. Vauldi, indeed, just watching your story there, it really does highlight just the personal tragedy that many are experiencing. We know that nearly 50 people have died and many more are still missing. Just update us on the rescue operation.
Well, Lindy, rescue operations are still ongoing. I hesitate to call it rescue operations because at this stage it will just be recovery. Hope for any victims that might be buried under the mud being pulled out alive. Those have faded a long time ago. Families like Rebecca Kammer know now that what they will be doing is going to the morgue to try and identify those bodies. There are 22 unidentified bodies left at the morgue. The local police commissioner saying that what they're doing with the Red Cross now is actually taking some of the families, assisting them to go to the morgue, because it is quite a distance between Salai and Nakuru. It takes you about an hour to get there, and many of these families have lost everything. They have no means of transport, so the government is assisting with that. Red Cross is also trying to trace those who are still missing. There are 2 active tracing desks where families have left details of those people that are still missing, but retrieval has been slow. We followed some Kenya Defence Force soldiers this morning. They'd been out since 6 o'clock. They'd found nothing for about 4.5 hours. At 10:30 they finally found one body. It was a body of a boy. We initially thought it was Rebecca Kammer's son. It turned out not to be, and that's basically what they found for the entire day. And that brought the death toll up to 45, the single highest death toll in flood-related incidents. 162 people have died in Kenya since the start of the rainy season in March.
And indeed, of course, now as we see, it is the focus of authorities and officials now to ensure that this does not happen again. We understand that officials today drained a nearby dam, fearing possible further destruction. Just tell us more about that, and in particular, what's going to happen to those people living around these dams?
Well, Lindy, they're going to have to be moved, but they're doing it in such a manner that where they're pumping the water out, they're actually decommissioning one of the dams on this flower farm that has several dams on it. They're decommissioning one of the dams because that dam has been found to be structurally unsound. So what KDF engineers are doing is they're pumping out water. Thousands and millions of cubic liters of water per second. It'll take them about a month in order to pump out all of the water from that dam, and that water was the cause of the panic in Salai this morning, because we were suddenly there was just this rush of water down the mountain slope that people thought that the dam had burst again, because obviously that is what happened on Wednesday night. It started with a trickle, and that flow just became a giant wave that swept away two villages and displaced thousands. So that's what they thought had happened today. There was a breakdown of communication between the soldiers and the people at the dam. What they needed to have been told is that these procedures were underway. It turns out the villagers weren't informed. It caused a mass panic. Now what the engineers are saying is that they're doing it in such a way that they're diverting water to where there aren't settlements. But the fact of the matter is these two villages that were affected have been completely destroyed. Farm acres have been lost, and they'll need to look at a resettlement plan, but that is in the long term. Their immediate focus is to provide these people with shelter, with food, and to provide those families who are still looking for missing loved ones with some sort of closure.
And indeed, Vauldi, as you mentioned, 162 people killed as a result of these heavy rains. And that's just since March this year here in Kenya. Away from Nakuru, just countrywide, what are some of the other relief efforts that officials might consider to ensure that no further lives are lost and that people remain safe, particularly as rains are set to continue?
Absolutely, the meteorological office saying that these rains will continue for at least another month. The government is now saying that what it's going to do is head on an inspecting drive of all of the dams in the country to make sure that they are safe. But even that might not be a proactive measure. I think that the amount of rains really took people by surprise this rainy season. We are used to the rainy season in Kenya now, so people were prepared, but just the volume of rain in a very short period of time, particularly here, but also in Tana River, where most of the affected are. Those areas definitely need some kind of governmental support in the wake of these floods, and that's certainly something that government will have to look at, declaring those areas disaster zones in order to release some much needed funds to those people so they can start rebuilding. But the thought of rebuilding, Lindy, is still far off. People are still dealing with a tragedy that is quite recent, not just here in Nakuru and Salai, but also in Tana River, where they lost, where lives were lost and people are still displaced. The water level is still so high, and the rains just keep coming, compounding the misery.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for your coverage. Vauldi Carelse joining us there live from Nakuru.